Welcome to Inside Politics with Kevin Klein, beyond the headlines, beyond the spin. Straight facts, sharp analysis, and common sense conversation you won't hear anywhere else. Let's get started.
Welcome to another edition of Inside Politics. I'm Kevin Klein. I am joined by two of my Winnipeg Sun columnist colleagues. We have Royce Koop, who is also a professor of political sciences at the University of Manitoba, and Lawrence Pinsky, KC, who is a former human rights adjudicator. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me today to talk about some more inside politic information, if you will, or tidbits of news. I want to start by talking about a column that I wrote in the Winnipeg Sun. It certainly got a lot of attention, but what really hit me was the response I started getting from people in the Indigenous community, supporting what I was doing and cheering me on and pointing in different directions where we should be looking. And it was a story that I wrote about one community member who released what the councillors and chief made for a salary, and they were all over the $100,000 mark. Not a lot, but a little bit over the $100,000 mark. And the chief made a little bit more, but their expenses were over $100,000. I think one person had expenses of almost $200,000. And meanwhile, we're hearing about all of the poverty in these communities. We're hearing about the housing crisis. We hear about bad water or not clean drinking water. How does this continue to happen? Because it seems that from the emails that I'm getting, that finally community members are starting to stand up and go, no. Where is our money going? Because it's their money as much as it is the council or the band council or the chiefs.
Yeah, I mean, on this stuff, I think sometimes I always try to be cautious, right? Because I want to let people kind of handle their own affairs, and I don't want to be sitting in my ivory tower here in Winnipeg, kind of casting judgment. So, but I think the most important thing is to ensure that people in these communities have the tools to hold their elected officials accountable. Like if you don't like what this person's doing, if you think that their spending is unreasonable, if you think they're doing a bad job, if you're holding the incumbent government accountable for housing conditions or whatever, then you should be able to do that just like we can in Winnipeg or in provincial elections or federal elections. And I think sometimes that's where some of this frustration comes from, is that it's hard to hold.
Can we hold them accountable? Because you talk about politicians at the provincial and city level. I mean, first of all, as soon as the new Winnipeg City Council got in, they doubled their expense accounts. Almost doubled. Well, not exactly doubled, but almost doubled their expense accounts. That was one of their first things that they did, right? So what a great move for a council that should be cutting spending. They automatically just increase their own expenses. You see the expenses of a Liberal MP, Ariel, and she has an awkward last name, so Kayabaga, I believe, or Kayabaga. She was I think the House leader for a little bit, but she billed the government and taxpayers $173,000 for 9 days worth. $173,000 for 9 days worth of personal costs in her brief tenure as the government House leader. I mean, so we can look all around. And it just seems like politicians just want to spend money and not be held accountable. And it doesn't seem to me like we can hold them accountable, Lawrence.
So there's so much to say about this. I do agree with Royce. It's not a good look, and neither is the right thing to do for me to sit back and judge what Indigenous bands are doing or not doing, because I'm not a member of that community. At the same time, it's worse when Indigenous people themselves can't hold their leaders to account. And you remember Mr. Harper, when he was Prime Minister, tried to pass some legislation that allowed for a form of accountability. Indigenous leadership really did not like that and said it was an infringement on their rights to govern themselves. But I don't recall, and I may be wrong about this, I don't recall the Indigenous groups, the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs or the IFM or any of those groups coming out and saying, Mr. Harper, you can't do that. This is ours. And here's our proposal for our legislation that we're going to impose on ourselves. They didn't do that, I don't think. And so we still see this vast spending. I can't say it's waste. It looks like it from a distance. Don't know if it is. And we remember as well a liberal minister with the orange juice for, was it $15 or $18 glass of orange juice? I can't recall. That was such a symbolic show of waste in government. And Kevin, that's what you're touching on in both instances, in the Canadian polity and in Indigenous politics. I can tell you, this is anecdotal. Years ago, I had a file, and it was a child and family services file, itself a problem, up north with a certain band. And this was the situation. It was like the Montagues and the Capulets. The father came from one group in the band and the mother from a different one. And every time the father's group took power, the Child Protection Agency would go and apprehend the children from the mother and place all the children with the father. And then when the mother's group won the band election, they'd apprehend the children from the father and place them all with the mother. And the kids would bounce back and forth. It was so wrong and so corrupted and so not child focused. I don't know that that's emblematic of every band or any other band, but it happened there. We see the expenses that you just talked about, and the Indigenous bands, in my view, need to demand of themselves accountability. And I don't know if they will. I think Canadians in government need to demand accountability. I don't know if Canadians will either, but that's what has to happen, because frankly, we don't have the money, and neither do they.
But who's going to stand up for the people in these communities? And I think that was the purpose of my article. Is I thought this is not fair to those that do live in that community, that are members of that community.
Right.
Seems unfair, and we need to have a champion for that, right? We tend to not want to get involved, which is fine, right? Because I agree with you, it's not for us. They have their own governments, but someone has to advocate for them. Someone has to stand up for people in the community to say, hang on a second. Where is the money going? Why do members of the community not have, sufficient housing or affordable housing or clean drinking water and so on? But it's the same in government. You have this lady with 9 days, $173,000. I can't fathom that for a second, that you would be able to spend that much money. Or council, Winnipeg City Council, when they first got in I think it was 2022, where they decided to give almost double their expense accounts. All of that to me is outrageous, but they continue to do things like this. They do it early enough so that people forget it by the time the election rolls around. So look, Royce, I mean, as a political scientist, there's got to be ways that we can start introducing, or a certain level of government can start introducing legislation so that it doesn't happen. And isn't that the right thing we should be doing?
Yeah, yeah. The government house leader is spending huge amounts of money. I mean, over the course of a few days, we really have no clue what that was about. There was kind of a hint that there was someone who did some short-term work. They got paid $19,000 a day to do this work, but we wouldn't. We don't know. No one will answer any questions. It wasn't covered in the media. It was covered by Blacklocks, which is an outstanding little investigative group of journalists in Ottawa, but it wasn't picked up by the CBC or by CTV. So we might never know where this money went. And the reality is there's lots of little news stories like this right now. Like this government is the Prime Minister does not have a handle on what's happening in his government. These stories are starting to add up. The one that really stuck out to me over the last week was about the parliamentary budget officer. We had an interim parliamentary budget officer who did a news conference maybe a couple of months ago, where he raised the alarm about government spending and deficit spending in this budget, 140 billion in new spending over the next 5 years. He said it's unsustainable, it's dangerous. And now he's not going to get reappointed to the job. And the government has said they're not reappointing him. They want to get someone who with more tact and discretion, by which they mean they don't want him speaking out of turn. This is Banana Republic type of stuff that we're hearing here. And yet these news stories are adding up. And Canadians really, they hear these stories and they relate to them. Spending this much money in such a short period of time. Who got that money? They want to know. And like I say, these stories are adding up.
Look at the Green Slush Fund. Look at exactly what you just said. He was actually, I don't think it was a press conference. It started with testimony before a House committee. He was mandated to be there, and he warned the Canadian public. And now they say we're not renewing him. We want someone with more tact and discretion. It is exactly a banana republic. It is a rot at the core of government. And again, I keep saying this. When will Canadians say it's not good enough? When will they not be fooled by the placid, dulcet tones of Mark Carney's voice? That's the question. But it better be sooner, because I don't know how much of a country we're going to have left. Not much, I don't think.
Well, I think the government has done an excellent job at making us rely on them. And that's why we're not seeing a lot of change. We rely so much on the government. And I think I've shared that story before where you sit in a caucus room or whatever, and they talk about, an election coming up. How can we get checks sent out to people? Because people like to receive checks. That makes them remember the government. I almost fell to the floor, because that to me is ridiculous. But we are seeing a government, and the Liberal government, especially for the last 10 years, trying to change Canada, drastically change Canada, and making us more dependent on Canada, but also making us, I think Trudeau called it, a post-national state. And even recently, we heard that Canada's spy chief, I didn't even know we had a spy chief, but we have a spy chief who says he's warning people of increasing violence, radicalization of Canadian children. He's warning Canadians about this. The extreme is motivated by different ideologies such as anti-Semitism, xenophobia, misogyny. It is extreme interpretations of religion, and it's happening in our country. But you don't hear our politicians talking about it. They're not taking action about it. And the media is not talking about it. And at the same time, you have somebody like Wab Kinew, the premier in Manitoba, who is like a golden child, right? He puts out videos, he gets likes, he's on TikTok, he's on Twitter. Oh, everyone, look at what he said about this, about the child pornography thing. Look what he just said about somebody being released from prison who murdered somebody. Well, my mom was murdered. No politician stood up and jumped in front of the camera saying we have to change the laws. And now Wab wants to raise the Palestinian flag in Manitoba, where the Grey Cup is happening this weekend. And he's going to raise the Palestinian flag in Memorial Park, right across from the legislature. Where's this coming from?
That's exactly the problem, Kevin, that you just pointed to. And it's not that they're doing nothing, it's that the politicians are doing the wrong thing. Wab Kinew is raising a flag that's a symbol of hate, that's a symbol of anti-LGBTQ. Understand where this movement comes from. It starts in a toxic brew of the Muslim Brotherhood, the Nazis, and the Soviet Union. That's who built that movement. There was never ever any other movement about Palestinian nationalism. You note that Gaza, for example, was controlled by Egypt between 1948 until 1967. The so-called West Bank was controlled by Jordan. No movement at all. The only movement was to destroy the one Jewish state. That was it. And that's what the flag represents. It's led by people who will snuff out any kind of opposition. It's people, if you're an Arab who wants to do business and have peace, a Palestinian wants to have peace with your Israeli neighbors, you'll be shunned and or killed. That's the reality that goes on there. And that's the flag that Ms. Chow in Toronto and Mr. Kinew in Winnipeg are raising on Crown lands. And Mr. Kinew says that there has to be room at the table, but he's making room at the table for people who want to burn down the entire house. And that's what the head of intelligence was saying. And he's right. And it seems to me that Canadians need to stand up for Canadian values like peace, order, good government, democracy, freedoms, all of these things that those people in that flag stand against. And I guess that's the problem. I don't know if Mr. Kinew And it all starts with Mr. Carney, who recognizes the non-existent Palestine. If they understand what they're doing, or if they actually are sacrificing long-term interests of Canada and the West at the altar of short-term political gain.
I
Because
guarantee you 100%, Lawrence, that he knows what he's doing. I personally sent an email to the Premier's office, to all of his staff, and to the communication staff, making sure I had all bases covered, asking for a comment. I wasn't looking for anything negative. I wasn't attacking it. I just wanted a comment. I asked about what's the exact time that this is going to happen, and can the Premier offer a comment on why he's doing this? Silence. We got a note back. Absolutely. We'll get you something. And then we never heard from them again. So to me, if you're hiding from the media, you know exactly what you're doing. And Royce, political scientists and stuff, I see this as nothing more than politicians yet again being fearful to do one thing or another. So they just do everything. They pander to everybody as much as they can. They're trying to be all things to everybody, and it's not going to help us.
I'm not sure about that in this particular case. I think one thing that's important to note here is that it was the federal government's decision to recognize the Palestinian state that has basically created a kind of legal cover here for other politicians to do this. You know, you can't raise other flags if you also aren't raising the Palestinian flag. And so I lay a lot of this at the feet of the federal government. But no, you're right. I mean, politicians love doing this. They love raising every flag that from every group that they think they can win votes from. I mean, I always thought that one of my most politically incorrect opinions, although other people seem to be coming around to this, so maybe it's not the case anymore, is that we shouldn't have any foreign flags or any flags other than the Canadian flag flying above Canadian public buildings, especially not legislatures or city hall. There's just no reason for it, and over time, it's created a situation where basically kind of parochial politicians use it
Mhm.
to build up a vote base amongst particular groups. I think we should do away with it altogether. You know, just be completely fair with everyone. There's only one flag, the provincial flag, the maple leaf that flies above our buildings. And I note that the mayor of Calgary, newly elected, just released a news release yesterday, partly in response to this issue with the Palestinian flag, but saying that he's going to introduce a motion to do precisely that, say that
Yep.
there won't be any more flags raised above Calgary City Hall. And really, I think that's the way to go these days, to be honest.
And it's already
100.
happened in some municipalities. I think it was Saskatoon has already
Yeah.
made that. They've changed
Yeah.
that, and they said we're not going to fly any more flags. I agree with that 100%. Even as a politician, they were photo ops, right? That's
Yeah,
what these
yeah,
flag raisings are. They're photo ops so that you can get something out on your Instagram or your Twitter or whatever it is that you want to do as a politician. And you're absolutely right, Royce. It's a way of building their base or connecting with that community. But I agree. I think we should, go back to the fact that we just fly the Canadian flag, the provincial flag, or if you're at the city hall, fly the city flag. Having all these different flags flown, I disagree with that. I think what the Calgary mayor is doing is excellent, and I supported it when I believe it was Saskatoon that did it. I
I,
supported that.
I totally agree. I'll make it unanimous. This is a giant mistake. And legacy leadership of certain ethnic communities, including the Jewish community, liked when they flew an Israeli flag. And I argued this is entirely wrong. The only flags that should be flying are Canadian symbols. And you could define that either narrowly or widely, but that's okay. It should only be Canadian symbols. We have to build unity and we have to build Canadian culture and values. We're not promoting other countries' values. It's different if the leader of a foreign country comes in, so you raise their flag out of respect. That's fine. But
hmm
other than that, this is pandering. It's nonsense. And in this particular instance, it's a flag that doesn't represent peace. It doesn't represent two states. It doesn't represent coexistence. It represents really violence and hate. And that's the problem. I wish it didn't. And maybe one day it won't. But at this point and in its history to date, that's what it represents, and it's simply wrong. The fact that the premier in Manitoba did it on the same day as the Santa Claus parade, the same day as people are here for the Grey Cup, it just shows an ignorance, frankly, a lack of appreciation for what the police have to go through. You know, the resources that are going to be spent on this? It's it's preposterous when we should be building national unity and values, but the premier wants to prioritize something else. And anyone in an ethnic community, including the Jewish community, who supports this, with the greatest of respect, is out of their minds. They have to support Canadian values, not parochial values of some other group or culture. I'm sorry, it's enough.
Yeah, again, it goes back to what Royce had said that we just need to stop it. But again, what politician, going back to other discussions we've had, has the strength or the fortitude to stand up and say, look, we are only going to fly the Canadian flag, the provincial flag, or the city flag, depending on what building it's at. If it's a city building, of course, you want to have the city flag there too. But politicians take advantage of these opportunities. They take advantage of them for photo opportunities, like I said.
But the answer to your question, Kevin, is the mayor of Calgary and the mayor of Saskatoon. They actually did stand up. Yeah, to their credit. So,
and nothing happened. Like, and it does. It seems fine, right? I mean, right. What's good for one is good for all. But I guess what I was trying to lead to, and I just kind of got off track there, was there doesn't seem to be any nation building by our political leaders right now. You know, the only nation building that they attempted was let's all make Trump the evil guy, and we can all agree that he's a bad guy, and that's going to build our country. It didn't. I mean, there's still provincial barriers for trade. We still have a lot of division in Canada, and I just don't see any politicians stepping up saying, this is Canada. This is how we're going to do things in Canada. These are the rules we live by, and so on. It's not happening anymore, Royce. Not like it did back in the day.
Yeah, I agree, and it's kind of sad. I mean, I don't take any joy from that position. I mean, if groups like Nigerians in Winnipeg kind of gather at City Hall and raise their flag and everyone claps, that's kind of lovely. But the truth is that a lot of these things now they lead to division now. Not Nigerians, but the kind of country that we've built now we've done it in such a way that these things turn into divisive occasions rather than occasions where we kind of celebrate, the fact that we have distinctive communities, distinctive groups, and that's partly why I think we should just do away with it. And you're right. I mean, we need to be focusing on the development of a common identity in this country, going back to kind of the Diefenbaker view of unhyphenated Canadianism. What does it mean to be a Canadian? You can come from all different parts of the world, but you're here. What does it actually mean to be a Canadian? We didn't get that over the last 10 years. What we got was Justin Trudeau's conception of what was it? The post-national state.
Post-national state, yeah.
It's not enough. A people need an identity. People that live together in a particular landmass, we need symbols. We need stuff to bring us together. We need stuff that we're going to hold in common. We've had 10, 11 years now where a government not only refused to do that, or they outwardly were kind of dismissive of the symbols that we did have. And as we are seeing with this poppy occasion, we still have an establishment that is dismissive of those kinds of symbols. And I agree with you, Kevin. We need to get back to that. And the people that really believe this too, by the way, are people in immigrant communities. The people that really, you go to Canada Day celebrations, look out at the crowd. It is a multiracial celebration, so they're celebrating symbols, and our elected officials need to get back on this, I think.
But I rarely meet people, sorry, Lawrence, I rarely meet people anymore that say they're Canadian. They're either this type of Canadian, that type of Canadian. Like, they're not Canadian. Even if they were born here, even if their family's been here for centuries, they're not Canadian. They're Italian Canadians, or they're Jewish Canadians, or they're whatever, right? They're not Canadian anymore. Why can't we just be Canadian? That's what I think is missing, is that there was once a time when people were always joked about that if you wanted to get treated properly traveling the world, put a Canadian flag on your backpack. And Americans used to do it all the time, right? So the Canadian flag on their backpack. Now, I don't know what it means. And I'm not saying this to be facetious. I don't know what it means to be Canadian anymore.
There's a lot to unpack with that. And You said there aren't Canadians anymore. It's really interesting because the Parliament in Ottawa just passed some legislation that says as long as you were here for 1,000 days, your kids, your kids' kids can all be Canadian, even if they do not live in the country. So I relocate to Timbuktu. 2 generations down, they can claim Canadian status, even though nobody's here. They may not speak. I may not speak English, or my kids may not speak English or French anymore. What is the bizarro thinking behind completely diluting what it means to be Canadian? And this goes back to a failure of multiculturalism. I used to be really proud of multiculturalism as a Canadian value because I naively thought that we were teaching not only to respect the individual cultures of the people to come, but also under the umbrella of a Canadian culture. But they forgot the umbrella. They forgot the Canadian culture. They omitted it. And it just becomes little pockets of segregated people. You can't build a country. Now, the leader of the Bloc Québécois said Canada is a false entity because of this very point. How do we keep the country together if we can't define what it means to be Canadian? If for Nigerians it means one thing, for, I don't know, choose another country, it means something else. It makes absolutely no sense. And remember as well the history of multiculturalism, that Pierre Elliott Trudeau used it and put it in, really enshrined it in Canadian law and in our constitution as an offset against French nationalism in Quebec. Mm-hmm. That was one of the origins of why he did that, which is okay, well and good, but only if you build that massive umbrella to create what it means to be Canadian. In fairness, Pierre Elliott Trudeau tried to do that a little bit. His son didn't do it at all. And you could argue with me to say maybe he didn't do that. That's fine. But clearly the son didn't do it. Mark Carney, really either Europe, he said he was European. So whatever he is with his assets in the United States, they don't believe in a Canada anymore. They do believe in a post-national state or a non-national state. You're never going to keep it together based on that. And that's part of the problem.
Yeah, having an identity as a people, as a nation, as a country, it's not like some biological thing. It doesn't just happen. You need symbols, you need your leaders to actually reinforce it. And we saw that under Prime Minister Harper. There's a focus on, historical things that kind of brought Canadians together. Nowadays, the simplest symbol of all, the least controversial, the poppy, is now all of a sudden controversial. And so we need politicians, we need our leaders to actually be active in this sort of thing, especially now. There's so many people coming to this country. We can't expect people to walk onto Canadian soil and suddenly know exactly what it means to be Canadian, to participate in a shared identity. Our leaders have to do something to bring people together. And that's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, failing of the Trudeau the Lesser's time in office over the last 11 years, I think.
So go back to what we started talking about, though, when you have the head of Canada's spy agencies, warning Canadians of the radicalization of our children. Where are the politicians? If I'm in office right now, I'm making this a very big deal.
Well, Kevin, I've got to tell you, I was in my office on Portage in Maine back in October, November of 2023. There were people marching down the streets calling for an intifada. That's a failure of Canadian values. That's importing conflict from elsewhere, calling for violence in Manitoba. The provincial government awarded one of the guys who leads that, as did the city of Winnipeg, frankly. The guy who said if you believe that the oldest still existent Indigenous people of that land are entitled to autonomy, to a country, the guy who said that Zionism is a disease, that guy gets awards from the province, from the NDP, from the city. And now they're raising that flag because there isn't a sense of Canadianism, of what it means to be Canadian. It's instead an importation of foreign conflicts and prioritization of that. It's simply wrong and will spell the end of Canada as we know it.
I thought it was really sad that the first time you see so many Canadians coming together in years, really, was the fact that the Blue Jays were in the World Series. All of a sudden, they're Canada's team. All of a sudden, more people must have sprained their ankle jumping on and off that bandwagon than in history here in the country, right? But that's what brought Canada together, the baseball team. If you're a politician, I would be embarrassed by that. I would be embarrassed that that's what brings a nation together for a few hours, a baseball game.
You should
To me, that's just wrong.
you should also be embarrassed because baseball is a terrible, boring sport.
And the team mostly are Americans. You know,
Yeah.
they're not, they don't live in Canada or whatever. Well, I don't know. You know, I think we've talked about it on this show before. We've talked about the indoctrination that goes on at universities. No disrespect. You know, Royce, you even talked about it. It is happening on some university campuses. The fact that we have somebody in a position like the head of our intelligence service, our spy agency, warning Canadians that our children are being radicalized. This should be one of the top 5 priorities the government is working on, that the government is dealing with, that Mark Carney is working on. We need to stop this. I know that we've gone through some, we've heard of cases where, you know, some government, Canadians are funding some of these groups. Are they allowed to do funding or fundraising here in Canada? We're allowing certain people to come speak, and we're doing that under the guise of free speech. However, it's tearing apart the country. And again, the flag raising, the fact that the premier wouldn't get back to the Winnipeg Sun when asked a question about it, it saddens me. You know, I got into politics because I thought I could make a difference, and I really wanted to. But you know, when you see all this happening and you see the things that have been happening, you really question, you know, what leadership in this country is doing to this country. We can blame it on Trudeau, like you said. You can blame it on he's right, trying to make us all feel bad. But there's other leaders in the country other than Trudeau. There's other politicians other than Trudeau, and where are they? Why are they not standing up to that? Why aren't they not coming out and fighting for Canada?
Yeah, it's I mean, the answer is a cynical answer, is it gives them momentary political gain at a cost that's going to be a cost we all pay, which is the
Hmm.
future of Canada. I can't, this goes back a while, but it's still occurring. Do you know how many people tell me these are wealthy people with businesses here, etc.? They're planning their escape from Canada.
Hmm.
They see Canada as a failing, if not failed, economic and political entity.
Hmm.
And I do not begrudge anybody celebrating their own culture. I think that's fantastic. Um, Jamaicans, Nigerians, British, French, I don't care.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. But they ought to do it. They don't have to, they ought to do it. And the government ought to be fostering them doing it under the rubric of a Canadian identity. Don't do that, and it's lost. And that's why people are leaving. That's why there's over $1 trillion of investment capital leaving our country to the United States and elsewhere. It's one of the reasons. And it's one of the reasons people are planning escape routes out of Canada. That is so dangerous. And I agree with you, Kevin. This should be one of the top priorities of the government of Canada. It's not.
Yeah, this whole idea of people, you know, being indoctrinated, being brought into radical movements, becoming a liberal, we can't just assume that people, by virtue of the fact that they're here, are going to become democratic people. They're going to become liberal people, people that care about individual rights, people that are, you know, going to become patriotic Canadians. You have to do something about it. Sometimes when I read these reports, it feels like you're dealing with a sewer main break by bolting the manhole covers to the pavement. If you want to prevent it, you have to do something about it ahead of time. And the way you do that is, you know, in the past, even, you know, sometimes I disagreed with the way that previous liberal governments viewed, you know, Canadian identity, viewed Canadian citizenship, and I'll get negative comments complimenting Pierre Elliott Trudeau, even Jean Chrétien. But at least there was something there. At least there was kind of a liberal identity, small L liberal identity, respect for rights, and there was a kind of an identity that you could kind of attach yourself to, and you need that if you're going to prevent some of this insidious stuff that the spy agency is talking about. Deal with it ahead of time, not once it's already got its roots deep into the ground.
And I'm not a psychologist in any way, shape, or form. Never, not a psychology major, nothing. But it seems to me we're obsessed with labels. And that's what's hurting us, right? We're obsessed with all these labels. And I always thought growing up, I was always kind of taught not to label people. We're all the same, right? We're all the same. Take away labels. Labels are bad. And now all of a sudden, everybody, everything has a label. The one label that's missing is Canadian.
Yeah, you remember Jean Chrétien and say, "Oh, Canada is the number one country in the world," and I thought it was kind of hokey at the time. Now I miss that stuff. I wish we could get more of Chrétien back talking like that.
Yeah.
By the way, on the stats, I think we've dropped to like, I can't remember, 30 something,
27.
27th place from the top five, I think it was. Yeah, that's what we're seeing, and it's going to keep tumbling. I completely agree, obviously, with what you guys are saying. And yeah, my prayer is that we wake up to this as a country, however you vote, it doesn't matter, but that we value being Canadian and we wake up to that sooner rather than later, because I really do fear that we're seeing such a slippage that it could spell, as separatism grows in Quebec, super popular now, 20 points ahead in the polls, the Parti Québécois, and in Alberta, also growing. It's these are perilous times, and if we have a captain of the ship, he keeps driving us into the rocks.
Yeah. Saskatchewan talking about it too, right? Talking about separating with Alberta. I never thought these conversations would come up again in our country, but I'm glad we had the conversation today, and I'm glad we were able to, share different opinions on it and such. But it is about being Canadian. I'm concerned about a few things that are, I think a lot of this we can point it at our political leaders and say, look, you need to take the lead on this, not us on a podcast. Who's going to listen to us? What do we know? But
Yeah.
they've got to take some leadership in this.
Kevin, if you really want to defeat Alberta separatism once and for all, tell them they have to take Saskatchewan with them. This is brilliant. We've come across this solution today.
Wow, how anti-Canadian, Western Canadian. We're all the Western. It's supposed to be Western Canada.
Now, wait a minute, Royce. Wait a minute here.
Yeah, you're at a university. You're indoctrinating people. You're anti-Saskatchewan.
Anti-Saskabusher,
yeah. My wife is was born in Saskatchewan. She hates it when I tell people that. But I grew up basically in Alberta, so I always talk about how you could see Toronto from Calgary because you just look right over the prairies and there you go. Hey, let's not beat up on our Saskatchewan friends. They're Canadian, don't forget. They're Canadian.
I like Saskatchewan. I just need to kind of play the role of Winnipegger.
Yeah, Winnipegger. But I guarantee in the Grey Cup, the big football game here, Winnipeggers are going to be probably cheering for Saskatchewan. Want to keep the Grey Cup in the West, right? They want the Grey Cup in the West. So we'll see what happens. Anyways, gentlemen, good discussion. Thank you very much for this. Look forward to our discussion next weekend, and I look forward to reading your columns in the Winnipeg Sun. You can always visit our website, winnipegsun.com, to read Royce's column, Lawrence's column, and many other of the columnists we have on the Winnipeg Sun that share different views and share them openly and honestly. So I think it's good to hear from different people that have different perspectives. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure you like, follow, share, smash the button, do all that kind of stuff. And we honestly appreciate you watching this podcast. It means a lot. Thank you.
Thanks for watching Inside Politics with Kevin Klein. Please like and subscribe to this channel and visit thewinnipegssun.com for more.